Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. It's Thursday, September 16th. And this briefing is brought to you by Marana Group. If you're operating an e-commerce business, Marana Group can offer warehousing, order processing, and seamless distribution of your material. And you can find out more at maranagroup.com. I'm Rob Fowler. I'm the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and Brian Calley, the president of SBAM, is my co-host. Brian, for those who've been watching this briefing, we've been in different venues. We've done this 199 times. So this next Monday will be our 200th briefing since the beginning of this pandemic.
Yeah, really incredible to think how much has changed since this started. It is nice. You know, most of the time I'm back in the office doing this from the SBAM World Headquarters. But, you know, when we started out, you might recall, it was in my car. Actually, just last week, I did one in my car too. But yeah, a lot has changed. And but unfortunately, the one thing that keeps on staying the same is this constant churning. Like we have these issues that are coming up, creating uncertainty, creating a lot of hassle and headache for business owners that are in many cases still trying to figure out how to get back to where they were before, so that they can grow and build the type of future that they and find the trajectory that they were on before this pandemic.
Yeah, so we actually have a call to action out right now where we're asking our members to call their member of Congress over one of these kinds of issues. And while it's not directly related to the pandemic, it's an issue that's in some ways been out there for a while. It continues to come back. Why don't you set this one up? It really has to do with the IRS.
Yeah, and we've got a guest on. Alex Morris from the Michigan Bankers Association is joining us today, so we can talk through this. And you know, Alex, we've had you on before. It seems like it's never like for a fun reason. It's always, you know, when we've got an issue or a problem, a challenge in front of us. And in this case, it comes from a provision inside the spending package in Washington, D.C. So there's a lot of debate over this $3.5 trillion. And the feds are looking for a way, apparently, to raise another $460 billion with a B dollars or so, in a way that really is an unprecedented invasion of privacy, both for businesses and individuals. Alex, thanks for joining us. Maybe just give us an outline of what is this issue that is on the table and before Congress now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate being on, appreciate the opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, great. You know, we always have to ask that question at this point. Yeah, so what this is right now, and I think you use the right word when you describe it, Brian, when you say a proposal. This is something that we got wind of about 2 weeks ago. And just to kind of set up for any of your members that are on the call, the way the budget process in DC works is the president makes a proposal and then Congress takes those suggested pieces and puts a bill together, and they run it through the committee structure, and we don't need to get into those details, but it will become relevant in a minute or two when we talk about it. But essentially the proposal that the president made in his executive budget proposal was that financial institutions, so that would include banks, credit unions, and any other depository institutions, would be required to report to the IRS all transaction information for both business and individual accounts that have a typical balance of over $600. So in conversations with our members, that would include about 99.5% of bank customers. The vast majority of even individual accounts have balances over that amount. And this is not simply reporting transactions of 600 or more, but reporting every transaction from that account if the balance is typically over $600. So that would include business and individuals. And as you kind of alluded to there, Brian, our biggest concern on top of general government overreach on this and some of the pressure that it would put on our members is the privacy factor that you alluded to, and the issue of whether the government should have this type of personal information, personal financial information about your members and their business and their individual accounts. So we're thrilled to hear that SBAM has a CTA out. We also have a CTA out to our members as well. And so we're really encouraging our members to reach out to their customers as well, because while this does put some burdens on banks and credit unions, as we mentioned, we think the bigger concern is the sharing of their information. So we're just as concerned about our customers as your members are about their customers, and it kind of travels down all three levels of that totem pole there. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. If I can, Brian, can I go ahead and just kind of give a status update on where we're at and what we know at this point?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So what we understand at this point is a couple of things. First of all, there has been tremendous groundswell on this. And thank you to all of your members who have responded to your CTA. It sounds like you guys are getting near 1,000. We've had 5,000 individual letters go to members of the Michigan Congressional Delegation. As a result of all of these efforts of your association and others, and ours as well, the Michigan GOP delegation sent a letter to Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen asking to remove this language. The original request for this language from the administration came from the Treasury Department, which of course houses the IRS under the guise of making some data and information that they have more available. Her claim is that this could reduce the burden on banks and make tax filings easier both for businesses and individuals. Not sure that we agree with her on that point. So first of all, the call to action matters. The outreach of your members matter. And so if you take anything away from this call today, take that CTA that SBAM has sent out to you, take a few minutes to put your name on it. It really is important when a member of Congress gets 10,000 letters from their district. Action is taken when you have that kind of response. So just generally where we're at, we did find out earlier this week that the taxation committee, who would need to include this language in their version of the budget, did not. But this is just a draft version of where they're at. So we were pleased to see that there is some movement there, but there absolutely is still an opportunity that this proposal could make it into the executive budget, and that would certainly be an issue. It sounds like at this point that the House, at least from the Michigan Congressional Delegation, at least half of the delegation is in support of pulling that language. And currently, as I said, the tax committee released their first draft of that budget, and the language for this proposal is not in there. But again, this is a fluid process, and we certainly need to continue to put pressure both on Congress and the administration to understand what a really egregious government overreach this is.
Yeah, and when you consider that there's this much money on the table, I saw some estimates anyway that it was near $500 billion that the feds believe that they would be able to collect in additional taxes from citizens by having access to all the inflows and outflows of your from your account. And that's one of the things been misreported, commonly misreported out there, is that it's only transactions of $600 or more. It is not true. It is all transactions in accounts that have average balances over $600. That's what the proposal is. So it's far-reaching, and they say it's to catch more tax evasion, to catch more money laundering, but in this case, it really is treating every single citizen of the United States of America that has a bank account over $600 like they're a criminal. And so our call to action, in the comment section, you can find a link. If you haven't already, please do send that out. We've had a great response to it. There's other organizations, banks and credit unions have been reaching out. They're getting, their business customers or individual customers, and you can tell there's a lot of energy behind this one. A lot of SBAM members as well that have already participated, but the more the merrier, because when you beat this thing, and I saw all the makings. There's a lot of pressure on the system, and people in office like to get reelected, and if they get 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 communications, it's unusual. And so they're going to respond, and we're going to win on this. But we want to make sure that it's as big and as emphatic as possible, so that nobody ever proposes it again. So we want to win it now, but we want to win it in the future. And the best way to do that is to hit it very, very hard. And so thank you for the leadership of the Michigan Bankers Association in reaching out, because I know I used to be a banker myself, and kind of still am on a bank board, but it's not natural for a financial institution to get involved in this. Contact your member of Congress. It's not something that banks usually do. So in this case, when you see it happening on behalf of customers, that it's a whole nother level of disruption in the process. And I hadn't heard, Alex, that they said that that Treasury is claiming it would make taxes easier to file and to save money on. Like, that's ridiculous. I mean, and then there's also cybersecurity concerns as well. The Treasury is one of the highest targeted institutions or organizations in the world in terms of cyber attacks. And so have that much data all sent in. Banks are really good at cybersecurity. You very, very rarely hear of any problems with data breaches at a bank. And so we know that the data is secure there. And yet when you send it to the IRS, the number one target, a single data breach there could be cataclysmic across literally every, after a proposal like this, it could be every account in the country.
All right, Alex, thank you. We were talking about this just a little bit before we started, this issue of cybersecurity. Every hour, the IRS has a cyber attack. At least every hour of every day. And it seems a little irresponsible to put that much data in one place that is such a big target. So thanks for your leadership, as Brian just said, at the Michigan Bankers Association. And we'll have you back again sometime, hopefully to talk about this one having gone down in flames.
Yes, that's right. Well, we appreciate, as always, a partnership with SBAM and with your own members. Certainly the things that affect you affect us as well. And we look forward to continuing to partner with you all. Thanks so much for having me and for the time this afternoon.
All right.
Thanks, Alex.
So Brian, let's, we've been talking about this Biden administration vaccine mandate that's been sort of looming out there. Not a lot of detail on it still. I think you've had an opportunity to talk to the folks in the Michigan OSHA area, and what more do we know about this one as it begins to take shape?
Yeah, I got a little bit of insight just from what some of at least the first impression interpretation of the Biden administration statement as it's been received here at our state, at the department that would be charged with enforcement in Michigan. The first point, though, I thought before we get to that, I want to make is that there is no mandate yet. I know that, like in the news media, it sounds like there is a mandate, like a mandate has been implemented. What has happened so far is that the Biden administration has announced that they have asked a department to draft rules that would implement a mandate. We don't know when, or technically even if, that is going to happen in the same way that it was announced. So far there's not a mandate in place right now. But in talking with the department and also looking at the statements coming out of the White House and from the feds, they are saying 3 to 4 weeks. That's what the amount of time. Now, we've heard this before, right? They very rarely do they do things on time, but they're saying 3 to 4 weeks they'll have an emergency rule out. Now, from a process standpoint, there is there's an emergency temporary standard is what it's called. So the feds can put out an emergency temporary standard. It can last up to 6 months. Now, doing a permanent rule requires a pretty long process. If they intend to go beyond 6 months, you'll see the permanent rulemaking process start straight away. If you don't see that start straight away, it'll mean that they don't intend for this to be a long-term rule. So that'll be a clue that we'll look for in the process. The federal government, unlike state government, does not have the option of a 6-month extension to an emergency temporary standard. So they'll put an emergency temporary standard in place, like a temporary emergency rule in place. If at least that's what the Biden White House has asked OSHA to do. And so when they do that, it'll last up to 6 months. And then a separate process for a permanent rule. We'll know very quickly if that's the case. My first question was with respect to testing. We saw straight away immediately that there was a run on testing supplies as soon as this was announced. So a lot of companies are like, I cannot afford to not have workers in. I need to go out and secure tests and testing capacity and access to tests to make sure, even though the rule's not out yet. So there's already a run on in supply chain issues in the testing world. And so my first question was, well, what does that mean in terms of if an employer is not able to get tests? And so a good answer, we'll have to see how it's followed through in writing, but the answer was that if it's not possible to get testing, a good faith effort is required that you try. And but until the supply chain catches up with it, that everybody understands, it's not like they would be writing tickets. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you're anybody listening to this would say, well, that's not very good assurance. But that is the answer. At least the spirit was a good response that they wanted to be reasonable, understand there could be supply chain issues, and that you can't, if it's not possible to meet the standard, then they can't hold it against somebody for not meeting the standard. Another question that I asked is, what about if an employee chooses not to get the mandate or not to get the vaccine, and so they do weekly testing instead, then whose time is the testing on? So we have the question of who's going to pay for the tests. We have to wait for OSHA to say, but whose time is that on? Is the employee on employer time? My reading and also my OSHA's reading, preliminary reading of the statement out of the Biden White House is that it's on the employee's time. It's not something the employer is expected to make time for, to pay for. It looks like it is the employee's responsibility to provide that to the employer. Now, keep in mind that even though that might be a surprise to you and say, well, boy, it seems like the Biden White House would be more, on the worker side of this. But their intention is to try and force more people toward vaccines. And so in this case, they're not wanting to accommodate a different option. They want to offer the testing option because they think that it makes it more robust in terms of a legal challenge to a flat out mandate. So you can say, well, you don't have to have the vaccine, you do weekly testing. And if somebody chooses that option, according to the statement that they put out, it looks like they intend for the employee to be more on their own for that. I also asked, and there was no kind of insight or chatter about this, but as we've seen some organizations start to accept antibody tests as a substitute for a vaccine, as the research continues to confirm that there is robust protection provided by antibodies, that would that somehow be accounted for? I don't expect to see that in the rule, but there wasn't any chatter, no insight, no additional, other than my gut. There was nothing more offered by the department in terms of which way that could go. But that's one of those factors out there. I think when they put an emergency rule in place, that they're saying that this is necessary in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of workers. And so in order to say that a person with natural antibodies doesn't qualify, they got to say that doesn't provide protection. And I think that's going to open them, if they don't have some kind of provision that takes that in consideration, it'll just be yet another area where a legal challenge could come. So the question for the Biden White House is going to be, do they want to make sure that they have robust, exemptions and alternatives in place and make it, the mandate watered down, but more likely to survive a legal challenge? Or do they want to go hardcore at a mandate with making it very difficult to to avoid the vaccine if a person didn't want one. In that case, there are more avenues available for a legal challenge. So far from over, but in this discussion, but I really think that employers ought to wait and see how this develops when the emergency temporary standard comes out, because I could see you spinning your wheels a lot and doing a lot of work and a lot of machinations of possibilities that could very well end up being irrelevant when the details finally come out.
Yeah, I think there's, obviously we focused on the 100 or more employees as one of the standards, but there's a couple of other ways that small businesses get caught up in this. One of them, if they're a federal contractor or if they're in the supply chain of a federal contract, that is one of the ways. And the other is if they're in the healthcare world and they accept any Medicare, Medicaid patient or reimbursement whatsoever. And so this will affect a lot of small businesses, not just, and obviously we have a number of members who have over 100 employees. So this one's far reaching.
Yeah, and that's, we do have hundreds of members that have more than 100 employees, but there's also, we have even more that are just in the healthcare business. They accept Medicaid, Medicare, and then in terms of handling federal contracts. And we don't really know how far that goes through. It's not unusual for the federal government to provide some money. It goes through a state and then it goes to a subcontractor, and how does the requirement flow through to subcontracts? Those kinds of things, we don't know what the answer is yet, because we basically have a press release announcing that the policy is coming, but how far reaching it goes is an open question. But kind of an interesting development that yesterday and reported today, that Mark Hackle, who is the administrator executive at Macomb County, an elected Democrat, it said that he's just not going to implement a mandate at the county. My reading of the intentions of the Biden administration is they intend for it to apply to, counties get federal dollars, and so that was, it was, we saw a lot of Republicans come out and oppose it. In this case, an elected Democrat in one of the largest counties in the state to come out very publicly and forcefully against it. Most of the elected Democrats are holding their powder on this one. They're not saying much or anything about it. I think Congressman Levin had made a supportive statement about it, but most are wanting to either avoid or wait for more to come out before they get too deeply into it. But this, clearly from the normal Republican versus Democrat lineup, it doesn't look like that on this issue.
Yeah. All right. I want to get to a couple of other issues here. Let's talk about hospital capacity. It's some interesting insight has come out that concerns us, obviously, because that's the trigger for the state to have epidemic emergency powers. And turns out that right now that the cause of capacity issues in hospitals right now isn't necessarily COVID patients.
Yeah, so we've seen two hospitals now in Southeast Michigan. One that said our emergency department can't handle anymore, go someplace else. That's very unusual. And then also we've seen some beds close down or become unavailable, in both cases due to staffing shortages, especially nurses. And so that's one of the concerns with a lot of hospitals do have vaccine mandates. Some don't. The University of Michigan actually just said that their nurses don't have to because their union contract says that they don't have to. And so the union contracts is yet another kind of wrinkle in this whole process. But now we see hospitals that are running into capacity issues because of staffing, not because of COVID. In the past it was more COVID related. Hospital census numbers are up, but nowhere near what they were in the spring, or certainly a year ago last spring. So that is this is a concern and a problem that could very well be exacerbated when you consider that there's already a lot of fatigue in hospitals, and then you take some people out of the mix that maybe don't like the vaccine policy, and you could see this crunch in hospitals really persisting.
So there was a recent study. We've paid a lot of attention to economic impact of the pandemic on states and the different states' responses and the recovery of each of the states, and kind of where we fall in that. A recent study came out, says we're not doing so well.
Yeah, MLive actually went and looked at the Department of Labor statistics, and actually, I think this is we're showing right now the small business friendliness survey, and this comes out every year, and this is the 10th edition. So there are small businesses that are surveyed nationwide, and they're asked, it's a subjective opinion, how friendly do they think, and there's ranked on several different issues. How friendly is your state? And 43 states are ranked in this process. They had enough participation from small businesses in 43 states, and Michigan was one of those, and Michigan came in 43rd. So literally last place. So that obviously the opinion of small business owners in this state, of the friendliness of Michigan, the policies in Michigan toward success of small business, ranked very, very low. I'm not surprised by that. I mean, you and I hear it all the time. We live in among entrepreneurs and small business owners, and the frustrations over the last year have really, they started with the closures. That a lot of the closures and restrictions and capacity limits lasted longer here than in other places. Then when they were finally lifted, there was difficulty staffing back up because Michigan held on to the unemployment insurance benefit to the very last day that it legally could. So all of these issues together have really provided some challenges, or significant challenges to small business owners. And on this 10th edition of the annual Small Business Friendliness Survey by Thumbtack, it's clear that, I mean, Michigan came in literally dead last.
And they give a letter grade, and we got an F. One of only 4 states to get an F.
Yeah, so that's it's again, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, we know it, we hear it, we've seen it, we've seen the impact and the difficulty and recovering. And when you see, a lot of the bigger companies have recovered just fine. In a lot of ways, the pandemic pushed more business to the bigger companies, and yet the small businesses are the ones that are still trying to pick up the pieces today.
So, Brian, you mentioned earlier whether or not people who have antibodies from having had COVID, if that is going to be counted towards being vaccinated, having the natural immunity. Study, you sort of see a looming fight over this issue, right?
Yeah, and really, so if you've had COVID, you can donate blood. They'll take the plasma and the antibodies from you, and they can use it to help treat people that are sick with COVID. And so there's obviously a limited supply of that available. In southern states, there's a handful of states where the wave has hit hardest that are using most of that supply now. And what was hitting the news today, that is a looming fight that will be very, very charged, is the Biden administration has said, look, Texas and Florida and Tennessee and Georgia and those states are getting most of the COVID antibody treatments that are available, and we think they should be more evenly spread throughout the country. You normally put medical treatments where the need for the demand for that treatment is the highest, and so like the idea of evenly spreading it and not putting it where the infections are demanding it the most, but putting it in other places, I think is that's a whole nother level of fight in a place where citizens are literally, the lives of citizens like hanging in the balance of it and of the outcome of that. So it's one of those areas where I'm hoping that the Biden administration might back off and say, hey, even if you're disappointed in those states and vaccination levels, like you can't withhold the antibody treatments from, I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test. And so, obviously there's a lot of factors in the healthcare system to consider, but in this case, this is a fight that I think is, it looks and feels different to me than a lot of the other issues that the states and federal governments have been fighting over in the past.
Well, certainly we've seen this issue politicized in a number of ways, so we'll watch that one as it plays out. That is what we have for you today. Thanks, Brian, for tracking down some of the information on what small businesses might be able to expect. Just one reminder that we have an award called the Rick Snyder Spirit of Entrepreneurship Award, recognizing a turnaround company. It's really in recognition of the turnaround that the state of Michigan did. It was very much a policy-led turnaround. We don't want to forget that, and so we have an award we give annually. And so if you know of a turnaround story, the deadline for this award is tomorrow, Friday, at 5 o'clock. So I just wanted to remind you of that. I will not be here next week. Brian is going to take it Monday and Thursday. The 200th episode, if you will be on Monday, and I will be on an island someplace, not Mackinac. So we'll see you all the following week. Take care.
All right, see everybody. I will see you on Monday, and actually I'll be on an island too, but it'll be the Mackinac Island at the Detroit Regional Policy Conference, and I will see you from there.